Hey everyone, this is the pre-recording for the Week 2 live session for AMBC 115. So if you watch this recording and you take the quiz that is linked to the recording, then you will get your participation for Week 2. You'll get your participation points. So this week we are reading about Medicare, Medicaid, and workers' compensation programs. So first of all, what is Medicare? I talk about this on page 88 of your ebook. So Medicare is the federal health insurance benefit plan for the aged and disabled. This is enacted under the Social Security Act. So some of the requirements of Medicare, and this is on page 89 of your ebook as well. So you have to be 65 years of age or older, or people under 65 years of age with certain disabilities, and then people of any age if they have end-stage renal disease. So those are some of the basic requirements for eligibility for Medicare. Okay, so your book, this is a brief review of what's included under each part of Medicare. So Part A of Medicare, we've got hospital or inpatient coverage. Includes acute inpatient hospital care, skilled nursing, home health care, and hospice care. So Part A, that's also just referred to as inpatient or hospital coverage. Part B of Medicare is your supplementary medical insurance. This covers provider services, or kind of think of more outpatient services. And that's on page 90. So more specifically, when you look at it in your book for Part B, it does say outpatient hospital services, home health care, outpatient speech and physical therapy, and durable medical equipment as well. That's all covered under Part B. Part C is your optional extra coverage. Those are also called Medicare Advantage plans. Through Medicare, so that's an optional thing that Medicare recipients can take out is the Part C. And your Part D is basically just your prescription drug coverage through Medicare. So it's just a brief rundown of Medicare coverage. So Medicaid, your book talks about Medicaid on page 115. Medicaid is a joint federal state medical assistance program for certain categories of low-income people. They say that it's a joint federal and state because each state has some control over their Medicaid program. So with the recent Medicaid expansion program that happened a few years ago, some states had the choice, some states chose not to participate in that and not to expand their Medicaid programs, and others did. Others expanded that eligibility, that income eligibility for their state. So it is kind of a joint federal state program. So moving on to who's eligible for Medicaid. This would be the categorically needy, people earning less than that poverty level each month, and also the medically needy. So page 115 of your book. Your book says medically needy are those recipients whose high medical expenses and inadequate healthcare coverage have left them at risk of being indigent. So they would also be eligible for Medicaid. This is a video about Medicare and Medicaid. This is put together by CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. I tried to play this earlier and it wouldn't, the volume wasn't working for me for some reason. So when you come back into this document, you can watch this video if you'd like to learn a little bit more about the programs. Also, when you get this document, I do have a word search puzzle. This is about Medicare and Medicaid, so it's got some of those terms that we've been working on and reading about. So you can go through there and complete that if you would like to later on. I'm going to move on and talk about workers' compensation. Workers' compensation is a separate medical and disability reimbursement program that provides 100% coverage for job-related injuries, illnesses, or conditions arising out of and in the course of employment. And this is actually from AHIMA. They have a guide to medical billing. They have an article on there. So workers' compensation, well, there's a lot of benefits. There's also some negative aspects to it. Some of the benefits is it eliminates many lawsuits from occurring, just because this happened a lot in the past when workers didn't have that workers' compensation program. There were a lot more lawsuits going on from that, which makes sense. But now that it's in place, it's kind of eliminated that, and it's reduced it drastically. It gives rights and responsibilities to workers that are injured on the job, and allows injured workers to continue to receive income while on disability, which is awesome. Okay, and then it also relieves employers, except in cases of gross negligence. So in those cases, the employer would still have responsibility. Negative effects of workers' compensation. For example, a lot of some people may try to take advantage of this and make their situation seem worse than it actually is. So if something happens to them on the job, they might make it sound worse than it is to kind of get those benefits. Maybe each time they tell the story, it sounds a little bit worse. So those kind of things, a lot of people take advantage of it in that way. So in other words, kind of fraud and abuse. It leaves that open for fraud and abuse to occur. Another example is providers ordering extra tests for those workers that were injured, even though those tests may not be necessary. They might not be medically necessary, but they're just trying to get that money back on that workers' compensation claim. So those are some negative effects of workers' compensation. A note for billers: as a biller, always remember to ask if a case is work-related when a patient first visits for treatment of an injury, illness, or condition. Be sure to file claims for workers' compensation services as soon as possible. It's kind of a good rule of thumb. And this is another word search puzzle for workers' compensation. The chapter has some of the terms in there. So if you want to go back and do this later, that's awesome. And I'm going to talk a little bit about your week 2 assignment. So, activity 2, basically what you're doing is you are talking about what an MRN and MSN are. And these can have different meanings, different abbreviations, meanings to the abbreviations depending on what you're looking at. So make sure that you are looking at what's in our reading this week, what those abbreviations mean. Otherwise, you can't get full credit if you're referring to a completely unrelated abbreviation. So that's pretty straightforward. Activity 3, calculating collectible amounts and adjustments. So directions for this: calculate the adjustment and the amount that you may bill the patient in the following examples. Assume in all cases that the patient has fully met the deductible for the year and the provider is a non-par provider. I want you guys to keep in mind the collectible amount cannot exceed the billed amount, and when you're required to round, your calculations round to the hundredths place. For example, it's got an example right here. So instead of putting all these, you'll just add it to the nearest hundredths place. I want you guys to write these down, these formulas, for when you're going through and doing this part of the assignment. It'll make it a lot easier for you when you're completing these scenarios. A collectible amount equals the Medicare approved amount times 115%. The next one is adjustment amount equals the billed amount minus the collectible amount. So when you're looking on here, this right here is going to equal the billed amount minus the collectible amount. The balance due from the patient equals the collectible amount minus whatever Medicare paid. So collectible minus what Medicare paid, that is going to result in your balance due from the patient. So keep those in mind. Activity 5, your answers are going to vary on this part of the assignment. You're basically looking on this website and writing a 300-word synopsis on what you found, what you learned. For activity 6 on here, you're computing hospital write-off amounts. So for this, I want you to keep this in mind. The hospital write-off amount will be the hospital bill amount minus the DRG allowance amount. So compute the hospital write-off amount. Basically what you're going to do is the hospital bill amount right here, subtracting that DRG allowance amount, and that's the amount that you're going to put here for your answer. This next one, patient's responsibility amount, is going to be the DRG allowance amount minus the Medicare payment amount, and that's going to be the patient's responsibility for that one. So before we go here, you guys have a drill this week worth 25 points. You have that discussion question. Your discussion question is, what 3 aspects of Medicare are most important for a medical biller to be aware of? And then also, what aspects of Medicaid must a medical biller be familiar with? You can use CMS for this. You can say what aspects of CMS are important for a medical biller to be aware of. It might be a little bit easier to find some information if you're looking at CMS as a whole rather than just Medicare and Medicaid, but it's up to you. You can do either one for that. And then you also have your assignment, which I just talked about. Your assignment is worth 75 points. And you just click on this right here, and that's where you're going to answer, put all your answers in for that assignment. And let's see here. And as far as your live session participation points, you're going to go ahead and watch this video and complete the quiz that's associated with this video, and then you'll get your full credit. All right, everybody, have an awesome week. Take care.